In the late 1980, during a private boxing exhibition event attended by athletes, trainers, and a small circle of invited guests, three very different understandings of power existed under the same roof. Mike Tyson, still young and terrifyingly explosive, represented raw, destructive force, sharpened to perfection. Muhammad Ali, older now but still mentally dominant, represented experience, timing, and psychological warfare refined over decades. Bruce Lee, smaller than both and already gone in this imagined meeting of ideas, represented something else entirely, a philosophy of power that had never relied on size or intimidation. The room itself was calm and controlled, but beneath the surface, it carried the energy of men who had tested themselves against limits most people never approach. This was not a public spectacle, not a staged debate, but an environment where honesty could exist without cameras demanding performance. Mike Tyson had grown up in a world where power solved problems instantly, a world where fear ended conversations before they even began. From a young age, he learned that strength, when applied without hesitation, could overwhelm almost anything in front of it. In the ring, power was not just a tool for Tyson, it was an identity. He had watched opponents lose confidence before the first punch was thrown, had seen their eyes change the moment they realized how fast and violent he could be. Many of his fights ended in seconds, not because he outthought his opponents, but because he erased their ability to think at all. To Tyson, power was not an idea discussed in books or philosophies. It was something he had proven again and again with real bodies, real consequences, and real fear. When Mike Tyson asked Bruce Lee whether power alone was enough to win fights, it was not a boast, and it was not a challenge meant to put Bruce in his place. It was a sincere question shaped by lived experience. Tyson had reached the highest levels of boxing by trusting power, speed, and aggression, and those qualities had never failed him when chaos erupted. Yet despite all of that, Bruce Lee represented something Tyson could not fully explain. Bruce was smaller, lighter, and physically unimposing compared to heavyweight fighters, yet stories about him carried an unusual weight. Fighters spoke of his speed, but more importantly, they spoke of his control, his awareness, and the calm certainty he carried into every situation. Bruce did not rely on intimidation, and he did not project dominance through size. Yet people listened to him as if he understood something fundamental about combat that others missed. That contradiction is what unsettled Tyson. If power was truly enough, then Bruce Lee should not have mattered as much as he did in conversations among fighters. And yet he did. Tyson sensed that Bruce had built his understanding of combat on something deeper than raw force, something that operated even when strength alone could not dictate the outcome. By asking his question, Tyson was not looking for reassurance or validation of his own path. He was trying to understand whether power, even when perfected to its highest level, was the final answer, or whether there existed another layer beneath it that decided who survived when fear, structure, and rules disappeared. In that moment, Tyson was not speaking as a champion or an enforcer of fear, but as a student standing at the edge of a deeper truth, genuinely curious about whether strength alone could carry him forever. Bruce Lee did not respond to Mike Tyson's question by rejecting power or speaking against strength, because Bruce understood something very important that many people misunderstand, which is that denying power is just as unrealistic as worshipping it. Instead of dismissing power, Bruce placed it in its proper position. He explained that power is real, dangerous, and effective, but only when it is guided by awareness, timing, and control. Power by itself, he said, is blind. It moves forward aggressively, but it does not always see where it is going. A powerful strike means nothing if it cannot land, and landing anything requires distance management, emotional calm, and the ability to read an opponent in real time. Bruce described how many strong fighters rely on force to solve every problem, but when that force meets resistance, confusion follows. When emotions rise, vision narrows, breathing becomes shallow, and power begins to leak away without achieving its purpose. Bruce went on to explain that true effectiveness in combat is not about how hard you can hit, but about how clearly you can think while danger is unfolding. He spoke about how chaos does not reward the strongest intention, but the clearest perception. In a real fight, nothing unfolds according to plan, and the fighter who adapts first often gains control, regardless of size. Bruce explained that power depends on structure, balance, and timing, and when any one of those collapses, power collapses with it. A person can be physically strong, yet mentally rigid, and rigidity breaks under pressure. Bruce emphasized that adaptability is what allows power to remain useful, because adaptability keeps the mind flexible even when the body is under threat. Without adaptability, power becomes predictable, and predictability is something skilled opponents learn to exploit. Bruce also spoke about restraint, explaining that real mastery is not shown in constant aggression, but in knowing when to act and when not to act. He described how uncontrolled power exhausts itself quickly, leaving the fighter vulnerable, while controlled power conserves energy and creates opportunities. Bruce explained that power should be expressed only when the moment is right, because striking at the wrong time, even with great force, creates openings for failure. He made it clear that power is a tool, not an identity. And when a person builds their entire sense of self around being powerful, they become trapped by it. If power fades with age, injury, or circumstance, the person collapses along with it. Bruce believed that power should serve awareness, not replace it. And that awareness is what allows a fighter to remain effective even when strength is compromised. By the time Bruce finished speaking, it was clear that he had not taken power away from Mike Tyson's world, nor had he tried to elevate technique above reality. Instead, he had expanded the definition of power itself. He showed that power is strongest when it is calm, disciplined, and intelligent, and weakest when it is emotional, rushed, and uncontrolled. Bruce did not argue that power was useless, but he made it clear that power alone is incomplete. Without clarity, adaptability, and restraint, power eventually turns against the person who relies on it. That understanding did not diminish strength, it refined it. And refinement, Bruce believed, was what separated temporary dominance from lasting mastery. Muhammad Ali was not a man who went quiet easily, especially not in a room full of fighters, thinkers, and people who admired his presence. Silence, for Ali, was never weakness. When he chose not to speak, it meant something was happening beneath the surface, something important enough to pause the performance he had mastered his entire life. As Bruce Lee spoke about power, adaptability, restraint, and awareness, Ali did not interrupt, did not joke, did not deflect with charisma or confidence. Instead, he listened the way only someone who has been tested at the highest level listens, with full attention and without ego interfering. This was not a conversation Ali felt the need to win, because he recognized that Bruce was not trying to win either. Bruce was describing reality as it is, not as people want it to be. Ali had spent years in the ring discovering these truths through pain, exhaustion, and survival rather than philosophy. He had beaten stronger men not by overpowering them, but by making them miss, by confusing their timing, by exhausting their confidence before their bodies gave out. He knew from experience that raw power could be neutralized, that aggression could be redirected, and that fear often belonged more to the attacker than the defender. As Bruce explained that power becomes predictable when it lacks adaptability, Ali recognized his own journey reflected back at him. He understood that what made him great had never been strength alone, but his ability to remain calm while chaos unfolded, to think clearly while others panicked, and to see openings where others saw danger. The silence stretched, because Ali was revisiting assumptions he had not questioned in years. He was mentally walking through fights from his past, moments where timing saved him, moments where movement mattered more than muscle, moments where intelligence won before the final bell. Bruce's words were not contradicting Ali's life. They were explaining it in a different language. That realization takes time. When a truth aligns with experience instead of challenging it, it does not trigger defense. It triggers reflection. Ali was not silent because he felt diminished. He was silent because he felt understood. As the minutes passed, Ali began to recognize something deeper, something most people never reach even after a lifetime of achievement. He realized that Bruce Lee had built an entire philosophy around principles Ali had discovered instinctively but never fully articulated. Bruce was not bound to one sport, one rule set, or one identity. He had studied movement itself, stripped of tradition and ego, and in doing so, he had arrived at conclusions that transcended boxing, martial arts, and competition altogether. Ali understood that this kind of clarity did not come from talent alone. It came from relentless self-examination, from questioning what others accepted without thought, and from refusing to confuse success with truth. Ali's silence also reflected humility, a trait rarely associated with men at his level, but essential to those who remain relevant beyond their prime. It takes humility to admit that power, fame, and dominance do not explain everything. It takes courage to sit with uncertainty rather than covering it with noise. As Bruce spoke, Ali did not feel threatened. Instead, he felt sharpened. The silence was his way of letting the ideas settle, of allowing his understanding to expand rather than contract. This is why the silence mattered more than any verbal response he could have offered. Words would have reduced the moment. Silence preserved it. When Ali eventually spoke again, it was not to argue or dismiss, but to acknowledge. In that silence, Ali had accepted that power is only one expression of mastery, not the definition of it. He recognized that the most dangerous fighter is not always the strongest or the loudest, but the one who sees clearly while others react emotionally. Bruce had not challenged Ali's greatness. He had refined its meaning. That is why Ali stayed silent for so long. He was not absorbing a lesson meant for beginners. He was integrating a truth meant for masters, the kind of truth that does not announce itself loudly, but changes how you think forever once it settles. When Bruce Lee finished speaking and the room finally returned to normal conversation, something invisible yet permanent had already taken place. No one had been defeated. No one had been embarrassed. No challenge had been issued or answered with violence. And yet, something far more powerful than a fight had occurred. Bruce Lee had shifted the framework through which two of the greatest fighters of all time understood power itself. That kind of impact does not come from dominance. It comes from clarity. It comes from the courage to speak truth without needing to prove superiority. Bruce did not walk away as the winner of an argument. He walked away as someone who had planted a seed that could not be uprooted once it took hold. For Mike Tyson, the realization was subtle but profound. He began to understand that power, no matter how overwhelming, is not permanent. Bodies age, speed fades. Aggression loses its edge when it becomes predictable. What carries a fighter forward when raw strength is no longer enough is awareness, discipline, and the ability to adapt when the familiar no longer works. Bruce Lee's answer did not take power away from Tyson's world. It expanded it. It showed him that power is strongest when it is guided by intelligence rather than emotion, and most dangerous when it is controlled rather than unleashed blindly. That understanding does not weaken a fighter. It prepares them for the moments when force alone cannot save them. For Muhammad Ali, the truth resonated even deeper because he had already lived it. His silence was not the silence of someone who felt corrected, but of someone who felt seen. Ali knew that his greatest victories had never come from brute force, but from timing, movement, mental endurance, and psychological mastery. He had beaten men stronger than him by refusing to meet strength with strength, by turning aggression into exhaustion, and by allowing opponents to defeat themselves. Bruce Lee's words gave structure to what Ali had learned through experience. They put language to instinct. They gave clarity to something Ali had felt, but never fully articulated. That is why Ali did not rush to respond. He understood that moments like this do not demand reaction. They demand integration. What made Bruce Lee's answer so powerful was not just its accuracy, but its humility. He did not claim certainty. He did not declare himself superior. He acknowledged variables, unpredictability, and the limits of control. That alone separated him from most people who speak about strength. Bruce understood that real mastery accepts uncertainty rather than denying it. He knew that the most dangerous person in any situation is not the one who believes they are invincible, but the one who knows they are not and prepares accordingly. By refusing to give a simple yes or no answer, Bruce demonstrated a level of maturity that few fighters or people ever reach. This moment matters because it reflects a truth that applies far beyond combat. In life, people often rely on one form of power, whether it is physical strength, money, status, intelligence, or influence, and they build their identity around it. As long as that power works, they feel secure. But when circumstances change, when age, loss, failure, or unpredictability enters the picture, those who rely on a single form of strength often collapse under pressure. Bruce Lee's philosophy reminds us that lasting power is flexible. It evolves. It adapts. It does not cling to one expression of dominance because it understands that survival and success require more than force. Bruce did not win that night by silencing others. He won by refusing to oversimplify reality. He showed that power without understanding eventually becomes a liability, while understanding strengthens whatever power you already possess. That is why this story endures. Not because it imagines who would win a fight, but because it reveals how great minds think when ego is removed from the equation. Bruce Lee did not seek to impress legends. He spoke to them as equals, grounded in truth rather than reputation. Years later, when people asked Muhammad Ali about strength, fighting styles, and what truly made someone great, his answers carried more nuance, more humility, and more depth than simple declarations of dominance. He spoke about timing, intelligence, and adaptability. He spoke about uncertainty. He spoke about respect. Those shifts did not happen by accident. They came from moments like this, moments where truth was exchanged without noise, where silence carried more weight than words, and where understanding mattered more than victory. Bruce Lee's greatest power was never his speed or technique alone. It was his refusal to lie to himself. He did not protect his ego. He protected reality, and that is why his words continue to influence fighters, thinkers, and ordinary people long after his physical presence is gone. Strength fades, speed disappears, titles are forgotten, but clarity remains. The ability to see clearly under pressure, to adapt when certainty collapses, and to speak truth without fear is a form of power that does not age. That night did not produce a winner or a loser. It produced respect. It produced reflection. It produced growth. Bruce Lee did not defeat Mike Tyson or Muhammad Ali. He did something far more difficult. He expanded how they understood power, and in doing so, he reminded everyone listening that the highest form of strength is not the ability to overpower others, but the courage to understand yourself completely. That is why this moment still matters. And that is why Bruce Lee's legacy continues to stand long after fists have fallen silent. This moment between Bruce Lee, Mike Tyson, and Muhammad Ali was never about deciding who would win a fight, and that is exactly why it still matters decades later. It was about exposing a deeper truth that most people avoid because it is uncomfortable, a truth that says power alone is never the full answer, no matter how dominant it appears in the moment. Bruce Lee did not challenge strength, nor did he try to replace it with philosophy for the sake of sounding wise. He simply revealed that power, without understanding, eventually reaches a limit, and when that limit is reached, the person who relied on power alone is left confused, frustrated, and vulnerable. What made Bruce Lee's words so impactful was their honesty. He did not offer certainty where none exists. He did not promise invincibility or guarantee outcomes. Instead, he acknowledged unpredictability, adaptation, and awareness as the true foundations of mastery. That honesty forced both Mike Tyson and Muhammad Ali to confront something every great fighter eventually learns, which is that dominance fades, speed slows, and strength changes, but clarity endures. The ability to remain calm under pressure, to think clearly when chaos erupts, and to adjust without panic is what separates temporary success from lasting greatness. For Mike Tyson, this realization planted a seed about the future, a reminder that raw force, no matter how terrifying, must eventually be guided by discipline and understanding to remain effective. For Muhammad Ali, it confirmed a truth he had already lived, that intelligence, timing, and emotional control were the real reasons he survived and thrived against stronger opponents. Bruce Lee stood at the center of that moment, not as a conqueror, but as a mirror, reflecting truths both men already carried but had never fully spoken aloud. This story endures because it applies far beyond combat. In everyday life, people cling to one form of power, whether it is physical strength, wealth, authority, intelligence, or status, and they build their identity around it. As long as that power works, they feel safe, but life eventually tests everyone. Circumstances change, control slips, and when that happens, those who have cultivated awareness, adaptability, and humility continue forward, while those who relied on force alone struggle to understand why their strength no longer protects them. Bruce Lee's legacy was never about proving superiority over others. It was about refusing to be trapped by a single definition of strength. He understood that the most dangerous illusion is believing you have nothing left to learn. That is why his words carried weight without aggression, and why his presence commanded respect without intimidation. He reminded us that the highest form of power is not domination, but understanding, not certainty, but clarity, and not noise, but silence when silence is needed. In the end, Bruce Lee did not leave the room having silenced legends through argument or ego. He left having expanded how they thought, and that is a far rarer achievement. Because when someone changes the way you see reality, they change every decision you make afterward. Strength fades, titles disappear, reputation shifts, but insight, once earned, stays with you for life. And that is why Bruce Lee's answer still echoes today, not as a declaration of victory, but as a reminder that real power begins the moment you stop relying on it alone.